Hello, Janksters, and welcome to another edition of the MagicJank podcast. My name's Graham. I go by HamHawks42 on the internet, and I'm joined with a couple of lovely gentlemen. Starting things off, we got Carlos, Favorite Jr. How we doing, bud?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
No complaints, man. Yeah, life is good. Still, finally, kind of done with the New Year's and the holiday stuff, and we can actually get down to business in 2024.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and we also have Damien, F16 in the house. Damien, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you. It's been a few episodes, I think, since I've been on. So, however,
Absolutely.
you've been carrying on admirably. I listen to every episode. I'm your biggest fan on this show, and
That means a
they're
lot.
great. You guys have been doing great work. So, yeah, it's good to be back, though.
Yeah, we're glad to have you back. So how was your New Year's and your holidays since we didn't get a chance to catch up?
Oh yeah, yeah, it was good. Pretty chill. Didn't do anything too huge, but yeah, looking forward to the new year. Looking forward to a lot of the changes in and outside of Magic. There's a lot of stuff coming down the pipe, and I, for one, am happy to be back. Maybe right off the bat, just jumping in, but I love Standard, and I've been waiting for Standard to be relevant again, and Standard's relevant again. Great, it's a great format. All of us, create content primarily on Arena, so it's great to have people care about Standard and work on Standard and stuff again, which has been fun. Watching Timeless and other stuff, but I'm sure we'll get to that. I've been just enjoying the Magic content, looking forward to new stuff. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Well, and as Arena creators, I think it's safe to say that, we definitely feel it when Standard's good and we feel it when Standard's bad. Because when Standard is bad, Arena's bad, more or less.
Yeah.
I mean, the client's gotten a lot more broad with a lot more options these days, especially with things like Timeless. But, I mean, it's a Standard first client. It always has been. And,
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I
Yeah.
hope it goes well, but they're going to push hard for Standard. We'll be talking about that a lot this year, I'm sure, leading up to the rotation finally in September.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's not the Standard's in a bad place, but I am looking forward to rotation, I'll be honest. But yes, and I'm very excited to see what this year brings on that front, because the promise of revitalizing Standard. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, they're pushing it hard. Yeah, for sure. But first, the most popular format on Arena. You got to play it very recently, and I'm very jealous. Why don't you tell us about what you did last Friday, Ham?
So last Friday, okay, let's go back to the beginning of last week. It was like, I think Monday, I want to say. There was or Monday or maybe the week before, late in the week. In any event, not long ago is ultimately my point. There was this post on Twitter where I saw Will Hall. If you're not familiar, the Will Hall experience on Twitch as well as over on Twitter. Dude's an absolute legend. He just posted out a thing like, hey, me and Anurag Das are putting together a Timeless tournament, the first Timeless tournament. Let us know some content creators that you would like to see represented. And I, of course, popped into the DM with a handful of names. I believe I tagged both of you gentlemen on there, if I recall correctly. And then I also just said, and also I'm available, just saying. And I got a DM saying, hey, would you like to participate? And it's like, are you kidding? I will move around whatever needs happening. And I was fortunate enough to get the nod to come on into the very first Timeless event ever. Which was kind of fun.
Super cool.
It was a blast.
Yeah, I wanted to join. I don't have a deck made in Timeless. I don't have enough wild cards, but I was literally on my channel like, this is what I would play. And it was an Esper control list similar to what Mistmin and a couple of your competitors played. So let's talk about the tournament. Like, what deck did you arrive on here for this, and why did you arrive at the deck you chose?
I brought a list that, it's one of those decks that I was really, really happy to play it. I absolutely adored it, but I wouldn't recommend it to most other players. I brought a Jund list featuring Sneak Attack, which is an incredibly powerful card that's banned in a whole bunch of formats for very good reason, because it is absolutely insane. It's an enchantment for 4 where you can pay 1 red, and you take a creature from your hand, drop it on the field, it gets haste, and then you sacrifice it at the end step. So obviously that's incredibly powerful. 5 total mana investment. You can you get to drop one thing, you get to drop multiple things. Those things, of course, being Atraxa and World Spine Worm. So the whole idea is I get up to 4 mana, drop this, hopefully it survives. Or I get up to 5 mana, drop this, and activate it immediately, and you've got an Atraxa coming at you. And so the deck uses a lot of mana dorks, with Deathrite Shaman being really, really important. I also had Delighted Halfling in the mix. In some of my testing, I used Gilded Goose as well. I don't know which one was better in the end. But yeah, it ended up being pretty darn fun. And I was the only player playing any variant of Sneak Attack, which I was pretty happy with. There were a couple of other people who brought Jund mid-range piles, and those generally revolved around your Ragavans, Orcish Bowmasters. A lot of time they use Minskin Boo as kind of the big finisher over the top, which
very
notably
strong card.
my deck did have 2 Minskin Boos in it, I will admit, as plan B. You know, it's like, if you Pithing Needle my sneak attack and I don't find any of my removal, well, I got this guy in here too, so I might just go for your eyes.
The non-alchemized version too.
The non-alchem, yes, the 4-mana version, which is a big deal. Yeah, so I brought a Jund sneak attack list with the understanding that if I know if I, representing Team MagicJank as a janky brewer, decided to step into the ring with like a Breach combo deck that's card for card, what a lot of other folks were playing.
Storm.
Yeah, exactly. It would be, I don't know, I wouldn't really feel super confident and super, I don't know, I wouldn't feel great with myself. And it's funny, the reason that we landed, and that's me being a hipster more than anything, let me be abundantly clear. But my thought with it was, there are going to be a lot of eyes on this tournament, and I wanted to make an impression. I wanted to kind of bring out my perspective as a deck builder and as a Magic player. And I love reanimation strategies. It is my favorite thing, and it's not close. And I love modifying reanimation strategies from older formats, modifying it for Commander, figuring out what it is that it can do. Well, what is that? What is reanimation? It's taking a gigantic creature well before I'm supposed to be able to cast it and getting it onto the field.
Cheating it in.
Cheating it in, which is exactly what Sneak Attack's doing. So,
well, I think you accomplished that. You
Thank you.
Definitely made a mark. You just were telling us before we started recording that that Will Hall just contacted you and said, what?
Yeah. So they were doing a couple of community polls after the fact, like what were the most powerful cards, who were the competitors you were excited to see, and one of the categories that they had was the most fun decks, and apparently I'm in the final 4 for that. So I was like, hey,
awesome.
my final record was 2-3. My only 2 victories were against Jund midrange.
But in your defense, your losses were to previous world champion Nathan Stoyer. I saw that one on your stream. That was a great match. He's playing Jund Storm, which is very powerful.
He was doing the Rakdos Breach Storm deck, which if you haven't seen that thing pop off, oh my goodness. But and that was of course the feature match, was round 1. Round 1, welcome to the show. You're going up against world champ Nathan Stoyer. Like, awesome.
Yeah, we can forgive you for taking that loss. No worries.
I appreciate that. But I got a loss there. I also went up against Mistman playing Dimir Control, who ended up taking the whole thing down. And then
it's funny, his list, I copied his list because he's been playing historic Control for a long time. And the last time people cared about historic, the one time a year anybody really cares about historic, they have that one tournament. He, his Control list that I had been playing for a few weeks put like 4 copies in the top 8. And a bunch of people were messaging me like, oh, that Control deck you were playing. And I said, it's Mistmin's deck. Everybody who wants to play Control in this format copies Mistmin's deck. That's all this dude does, is play combo. He's the control guy,
absolutely.
In the finals with Arnie Huschenbeth was playing Mistmin's deck. And it was basically Mistmin's deck on both sides in the mirror in the finals. Like, that was his deck. He even gave him credit later on Twitter. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, of course. And that was also the deck that I was showing on my stream earlier. I wanted to splash white for Swords to Plowshares, but that blue-black Luris shell with Snapcaster and stuff, it did so well in Historic. I'm not surprised to see that poured over. And hey, now we get Brainstorm. Great. Throw that in the mix. Deal.
100%. And I got to say, one of I don't have a background in a history in playing older formats, like Eternal formats. I don't have that kind of, that's not part of my deal. I've been playing primarily Arena, is most of my 60 card competitive environment. A lot of the paper stuff is Commander for me, historically. And so as a result, like, I remember my kitchen table jank nonsense with my buddies back in the day. But as far as actual like vintage, legacy, even modern, I don't really understand those formats as well as I wish I did. I gotta say, I learned something big. Like, Thomas is teaching me a lot of really valuable lessons about how good. Like, I knew these cards are good, but like how good they are. The one that
why
blew my
Brainstorm
mind
is banned.
Yeah, the reason banned. I get it now.
You get it. Yeah. Now they have fetch lands. It's ridiculous.
The one that really blew my mind, the one that Mistman really like taught me single-handedly as I watched him absolutely dismantle me with it, was Mystic Sanctuary.
Oh yeah. Reason that's banned in a bunch of formats. Yeah. Oh yeah. And you can fetch it. It's an island. You can just fetch it up.
Exactly. So like when on their turn, even if they didn't have many cards in hand, it's just Polluted Delta pass. Dang it. Because like I know the top of their deck is going to get a Counterspell or an Archmage's Charm back. And if they have a Brainstorm in hand, that's as good as it being in their hand, just because they had because they their land drop. It is
Powerful
nuts.
stuff. But
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what? To your credit, you dialed in on the fact that, hey, this is a very powerful format. I should be doing a very powerful thing. Sneak Attack is a very well-established deck in Legacy. Previously, it hasn't really been putting up results, recently. But back in the day, I was playing Sneak and Show back in the day in Legacy. I had a mono blue Omnitel deck that was playing Show and Tell, and then there was Sneak Attack variants and stuff. It's a very powerful shell, very powerful strategy, proven track record. So you already have a knack for those kind of things. Like Commander, people are like, oh, I just play Commander. Well, guess what? You play the most powerful format. Commander's way more powerful than Legacy. Are you kidding? Like it's closer to Vintage or whatever. Even even without the Power 9.
100%. The only reason that format is not the single most unquestionably broken format in the entire game is that it's a 4-player free-for-all. That is it. And it being a 100-card singleton, even then there are plenty of commanders that are also combo pieces. But that's really the self-balancing and kind of the social expectation. If everybody had access to these incredibly powerful pieces, and that was the norm.
Well,
at these
this
tables,
is why, and
this
is why Legacy and Vintage and I guess Timeless on Arena now are really sweet formats. I know for me, that's what I want to see. I want to do powerful stuff, but I don't want to feel guilty when I do the powerful thing and kick the crap out of you. At least if it's a one-on-one game, great. We're both trying to kill each other. There's an understanding here. No hard feelings.
Let's go hard. Absolutely. Yeah.
That guilt. Yeah.
And the thing that I found another thing about the power level and playing powerful Magic, for many, many years, people were telling me about how awesome Modern was or how awesome Legacy was. And I just accepted, like, okay, you enjoy that play style.
Right.
That's great. You have fun. Sweet.
Yeah.
That's not for me, though. Now getting in Timeless, I of course decided I would give it a try. That was, I'll try it because it's the new thing on Arena. I've got a good collection. I'll figure it out. I'll put something together. We'll have some fun. Okay. Within the first day, I was like, oh, is this what everyone's talking about? This is awesome. The super high powerful things. Because there are some turns where your opponent has 2 Bowmasters. You got a Brainstorm in hand. That's really all your action. And it's like, well, I guess I'm just gonna peace out. Like, I just don't have it this game. Right. And that absolutely happens. But it happens both ways. And the nuance and the skill testing is just on another level. You can't make a mistake in that format.
Well,
like you're saying, both players are going hard, and it's really cool. I enjoy it way more than days.
They were laughing. Like people in my Discord and stuff or in my channel were telling me, oh my God, Arena players do not know how to play around Stifle. They do not realize that you can Stifle a fetch. I strip mine multiple people every day in this format because they're not playing. People aren't used to playing around Wasteland. Like even turn 1, you watch 2 Legacy players, they fetch basics. They don't fetch their underground on turn 1. You're gonna get Wastelanded. You're gonna get Daze. Just because your opponent's tapped out doesn't mean they can't counter your thing on turn 1, like with their tapped an island or whatever. And Stifle's kind of the same thing, where people just have to learn that this format, all the interaction happens in the first few turns. That's the hallmark of these powerful formats. Everything is cheap. All these super powerful cards are very cheap, and and with free spells and force of negations and all these kind of things, you can interact multiple times on the first turn. I think it's good. I think the format's interesting. I wonder, now that you're dip into like the competitive Timeless, do you think they're gonna add any more cards to the restricted list? Or maybe a further question is, if they did add a card, what card right now do you think they should add? I've heard a lot of people say Bowmasters. I've heard people say Brainstorm is just unquestionably not even close to it's the best card. But Brainstorm, I don't feel like deserves to be restricted, but maybe Bowmasters. What do you guys think?
I don't know, Carl, do you have thoughts on this?
Just from me playing the format for fun, nothing competitive. I can tell you I've played overwhelmingly against so many Necropotence decks. But I think Necropotence is also a fine check on Orcish Bowmasters. That being said, Necropotence, the power level of that card is very strong. And something I experienced almost immediately was getting Blood Mooned. So it's funny that you speak to nobody knows how to play around Stifle. A lot of people don't know how to play around Blood Moon. They're just jamming as many shocks and still try lands, just trying to get the perfect mana that they can, and then they get Blood Moon, they can't play the game, and it turns into not being fun. But that doesn't mean that Timeless is meant to be fun. It could just meant to be played the super overpowered format, which people enjoyed playing historic with no bans. That's the whole reason they made Timeless, right?
Right.
Was for the amount of people who enjoyed playing that format with no bans to play broken stuff. So, but it's interesting that you ask about restricted cards, like anything else that belongs on that list, because to me, I would think if you're going to put a card like Orcish Bowmasters on that list over one of the older, more technically busted cards, what does that tell you about that card in the formats it's legal in Magic?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, like Orcish Bowmasters is undoubtedly a very strong card in Modern, in Legacy, in Vintage. You know, probably one of the most powerful 2-drops they've ever printed in some time. I would even question whether or not this card's better than Ren and 6, like in Modern. And that's card, you know, that's been banned in other formats.
You're absolutely right.
You know, there's a reason they had to alchemize that card on Arena, so that way you didn't get the ETB trigger, which was very strong. You know, that being said, you know, we're also playing with cards like Dark Ritual, and that card's so overtly strong.
So
you know, being able to even play like Land Pass, Land Dark Ritual Shieldred on turn 2 is also very powerful, but not a lot of people are doing that, right?
Turn 1 Necro. God.
Right, turn 1 Necropotence, have all of these cards off to the side, me have infinite companions that I could just put in my hand whenever, right? Like,
well, and Dark Ritual is especially disgusting in the Underworld Breach decks, because what you're able to do is you're able to escape it, get a whole bunch more mana, use that mana to refill your graveyard, keep doing your thing, and ultimately end with Tendrils. It's silly.
Does that require any of these to be restricted, though? That still doesn't answer. Do you think these are breaking the format? Are people annoyed when their opponent plays Bowmasters? Yes. And is it super powerful? Yes, I know. But are any of these cards pushing like Channel being straight? There's 3 cards restricted in Timeless, for those of you who don't know. What is it? Channel, Demonic Tutor, and
Tybalt's Trickery.
Tybalt's Trickery. Thank you. So you know, those I think belong there. Are any of these other cards worthy of that very small list right now?
You know, at the end of the day, we're talking about these super powerful cards, and I feel like that's where, like, Timeless is where they belong. You know, I'm totally on board for them being banned, you know, in Historic and all that jazz. You know, make the curated gameplay experiences, you know, not include any of these. But I personally, I don't know, as far as the restricted list goes, for now, because things are still relatively new, I like the idea of kind of taking a more conservative approach. However, in the 16-player Creator Clash, I think, I don't remember the exact number, but the most registered card was Orcish Bowmaster. And in doing my testing, like, my Jund sneak attack list is my deck was basically a combo deck where I was trying to get up to the sneak attack and the World Spine Worm. You know, if I draw one and not the other, either card is dead, kind of a vibe, which was something unlike what most players were playing with good reason, as you can imagine. But in my various testings, all of my various builds that didn't have Bowmasters in them had a worse win rate than when I put it in. Like, it was objectively correct to run 4 of these in your deck if you have access to black. Period. It wasn't even a discussion. Even Missman, whose deck was primarily, and by primarily I mean like 95% ways to just control you, the win count was 4 Bowmasters. You know, like, it is just the best threat in the format by a mile, and it's not close. When we're talking about all these other really powerful cards, they're powerful ways that give you a large advantage in one way or another. Like Brainstorm, drawing you that many cards, giving you that many, you know, views into that many cards, and combining nicely with fetch lands and things like that. Obviously, very, very powerful effect. It's an effect that by itself cannot win you the game. You know, it's going to help you find the pieces that can. Bowmasters by themselves put 2 bodies on board, deals damage, potentially removes something, and punishes your opponent for drawing excess cards, which is the most powerful thing you can be doing in the game. Right. So I like this card, honestly, like, even like as written, it could have cost 3, which would have made it significantly less good and a little more fringe, but I think people would still play it. For 2, it's an auto include all the time, forever. It just is. And to the point where if you're playing in Timeless, the mana bases are so good, you might as well just splash for this in whatever deck you're playing. Like, there's no reason not to run it.
Yeah, and it's super powerful.
I wouldn't mind if it found its way to the restricted list.
Out of all the characters in Lord of the Rings and creatures, it's just a couple of orcs with bows, like nothing. But it's right up there with the One Ring, like
Right,
in terms
yeah.
of power. Like, okay, sure. These two dudes from the patrol out in the middle of nowhere in Mordor. Yeah, those guys and the One Ring. That's how Sauron wins.
These are the evil red shirts. These are the grunts. These guys shouldn't be the star of the show, but they absolutely
Super busted.
Yep. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So Timeless is fun. I know a lot of people are having fun with it. I haven't really dabbled.
Fun.
I'm having fun as well.
Too.
I'm having fun. I play really janky decks, but that's fine. I just got to hope we avoid Blood Moon. But I'm just trying to cast Doubling Season and Tameo Ultimate people, and it's great. If we avoid Blood Moon, maybe we win. If we avoid getting I don't know, turn 2'd, turn 3'd, we can win the game. And if we don't, then hey.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
You've got answers to that kind of stuff. You've got nature's claims and whatever disenchants. You
that. You got this.
Got basics. That's
it's funny.
Basics.
Well, and in my testing, I was originally trying to put together a reanimator shell that would work. I really wanted to make that work because, of course, I did. That was where it started. And the reason I ended up with sneak attack is because I had one where I had a sneak attack as a sideboard option. So my thought was I go hard on my graveyard, try to reanimate stuff. My opponent's sideboard's in all their graveyard hate. I switched to sneak attack was the idea.
I like that.
Yeah, it was a fun thought, but the thing that I found was I always sided in the sneak attacks and I never took them out. And they were getting the job done well over cards like Priest of Felrights.
Well,
which were,
wait a minute.
Which is kind of the best reanimation option.
We don't have Entomb, right? There's no Entomb on Arena, so
that's the key piece we're missing.
Setting up because that's the most important part of the deck.
Exactly. I was basically just doing like Stitcher Supplier, Mills, and Faithless Looting to try to set it up, which could theoretically get there, but when you have Faithless Looting as your primary option to fill your graveyard in a Bowmaster format, like you're just asking for it. It hurts. Right. So it lined up very, very poorly. Yeah. It was a fun thought.
From Timeless. Timeless, is wild, and I encourage people to get into it. But it being not a real format, like not a format tied to any sort of sanctioned events or actual tournament,
not yet.
Stuff is interesting. But
Well, and the other detail about that, currently, if you do a direct challenge on Arena, there's an option for Explorer, Historic, Standard, Friendly Brawl, and Limited. They don't have a Timeless direct challenge set up, and for the event, we actually had to configure it as limited challenge because the limited challenge doesn't have any card restriction. And so it was kind of the honor system to make sure we didn't sideboard in fewer than 60 cards because the game would have let us.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So, that was the way that we had to do it. Yeah.
It's a new format. And
it's not a fully sanctioned thing. Yep.
It's not even fully on there, let alone sanctioned. So, it's sad that really the only, I guess there's two because they're pushing Explorer this month for whatever reason. But the standard format is really the only way to qualify or to test for qualifying events in real life. Like we're entering into standard RCQ season right now. And I this might be a good time to jump into standard and talk about maybe, where is standard at? I mean, this is an important time right now for a lot of players because we just finished Pioneer. That's all done. And standard is a format that's been languishing for a long time. So this is the beginning of Wizards' big push to make standard relevant again. They are, with the standard showdowns coming back at LGSs, they're pushing all the RCQs to be standard. I'm not even sure if they're allowing limited. They weren't at first, but I think they might have walked that back. I'm not sure, but
some of the RCQs now, at least that are scheduled for January, February in my area. So that's New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland. Some have scheduled Ravnica remastered sealed RCQs.
Whoa.
There's only like 2 over the course of the next couple months, but also they're the same day as some other shops' standard RCQs. So I'm not how sure that went about, but that seems to be the limited format of choice.
Well, and for folks not aware, when we talk RCQs, these are regional championship qualifiers.
Yep.
So, if you want to get your invite to the regional championship where you could ultimately make it to the Pro Tour. And when we say regions, we're talking about regions of the world. The United States is a region, like North America is a region.
Canada's got a bunch. Yeah, it's your path to the Pro Tour. So a lot of players are focused on it. And this is the first time we've come back to Standard in quite a while now, since before the bannings and all the other things that have happened in Standard. So jumping back, as we see it, the tiers are pretty well, at least tier 1, I feel like is pretty well defined, but maybe that's changed over the last week. I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, the Boogeyman 5-color ramp still the best deck?
Yeah, so taking a look at, and I like to look at the data.
I love
Yeah,
it.
oh yeah.
Please,
It's
please,
hard
please.
to gather data from Arena itself, right? Because if you want to go off of like untapped stats and stuff like that, that's fine and all. Nothing wrong with that. But in terms of prepping for RCQs and paper, I think when we don't have paper data or not a lot of it, a good place to look is to Magic the Gathering online data. Because
Right.
there are leagues, there are challenges, there's preliminary tournaments, and they happen all the time. So to take a look at the data, one person you should probably be following for that is Frank Karsten. Number one,
Mhm.
he
Mhm.
develops the data based on Magic Online or Pro Tour metagame breakdowns all the time over on his channels. Um, and according to December 2023 standard winners metagame, at the top, 27.2% is domain ramp. Now that's bannable numbers.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's very high.
So just
Sure.
putting that on the perspective, there's only one scheduled standard ban announcement per year, right? The rest is to take emergency action or against other formats, right? Like they most recently
Right.
did with Modern. Um, that's not me saying that cards need to be banned in standard, but the percentage number according to December 2023 data on Magic Online only is within that percentage number, right? Um, it's very, very strong to play up the beanstalk into leyline binding. That interaction is so good. You're talking about a card that's been banned in Modern, in up the beanstalk, right?
Mhm.
That is so powerful. Um, Second to domain is Esper midrange. So some Esper variant, um,
Rafine
that
decks, basically.
Yeah.
right, Rafine decks,
Mhm.
whether that's Legends, that mid-range version, or even the more controlling aspect of it.
Right.
Third is Golgari mid-range. So
Wow.
that's playing cards like Mosswood Dread Knight, Glissa Sunslayer, Sentinel of the Lost City, or whatever that's called, the Merfolk. That's the
Yeah.
3/4 for 3 mana. Um, Playing up to Shieldred on 4, right? So Shieldred's still a very strong card in the metagame, whether it's an Esper, Golgari, or some Rakdos lists,
Mhm.
but
Oh
not
yeah.
not as prevalent as it was before, right?
Is it
Um,
funny that she was the worst thing ever and everyone was losing their mind?
right.
And yeah, like
Yeah,
naturally, I feel like the
absolutely,
format
right? They were
settled
like,
and
ban Shieldred.
Yeah.
it's like
Shieldred's a
she's
problem.
still
And it's
good,
like,
still
hi, here's.
strong, but not problematic. She doesn't have a problematic state in the current metagame. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like,
No,
hey,
yeah.
here's a Traxa, hold my beer.
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
which
Well,
is a
or
card which is
one
so much
mana.
value.
Yeah, one mana exile anything at instant speed and draw a card turns out to be a really good interaction, and the
Yeah.
domain list
For
has
I
that on
sure.
mean,
lock. Yeah.
shoulder decks shoulder was so good in the Rafine mirrors and stuff, right? Because
Mhm.
the connive,
Mhm.
you couldn't stop the connive. So shouldered on your opponent's side, if you were the Rafine deck, that was it. And if you had the shouldered and they didn't, that was it. You just gained all the life.
Yep.
But when the best deck isn't Rafine anymore, it's 5-color ramp, and the other decks are warping themselves to beat 5-color, like the low to the ground Demir tempo decks and stuff. They're not like
Yep.
just generating a bunch of card advantage, they're out tempoing you. So yeah, shouldered, not the best tempo play, kind of slowly dwindling in numbers.
Mhm.
It's weird. All these ripple effects and things like,
Yeah.
other decks changing is what's causing, shoulder to kind of fall
Yeah.
in value. But there's a lot of stuff happening now. Well, did you finish? So Golgari was in third. Was there any
Yeah,
more data
Golgari
there that
was
you?
in third, followed by Azorius Soldiers and
Yeah.
Rakdos Discover being at a tied percentage. Um,
Oh,
Azorius Soldiers we know is just a super aggressive blue-white deck, and the
right.
cards synergize really well. A lot of those decks have actually been putting Tishana's Tidebinder in the main to be able
Yep.
to deal with the domain decks, because you can counter the Leyline binding trigger, you can counter Atraxa and turn it to a 7/7 vanilla, even countering the ability of Invasion of Zendikar on 4, so they don't get to search up
Ooh.
2 lands, is
Yep.
fantastic.
Yeah, you could
Yeah.
basically counter those ETBs. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
counterspell the ETBs.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tidebinder's been fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, that card's great. Oh my goodness.
And the Rakdos Discover decks, there's actually 2 different versions. There's one that caps out at 4 CMC with Shieldred and Geological Appraiser, right?
Mhm.
And then there's some that go up to 6 and 6 CMC, or mana value rather, playing cards like Cruelty of Gix and playing the Trumpeting Carnosaur. Most of the
Right.
time, using Trumpeting Carnosaur as that 3 mana ability to channel, deal 3 to a creature or planeswalker, and then you reanimate the card with Cruelty of Gix later
Right.
on, and it's just a lot of value
And I
in the
mean,
Rakdos cards.
Discovery 5 hitting Cruelty of Gix again off the dinosaur is also very powerful. Cruelty of Gix, a big nod, I think, to the 5-color decks. I mean, that's one of the best cards against them. You nab that Atraxa, you get to reanimate that Atraxa, bam, you're in business. But one of the decks that I was surprised when you said Discovery, I thought you were going to say Red-Black Ramp, which is one of the decks that has come out of the woodwork to beat the 5-color decks.
Yeah.
But that's all from Frank Carson's article. So he's aggregating the winners metagame is actually taking all the winning lists and like averaging them against each other, right? For the month of December,
Correct.
is that right? Okay, so yeah. So I'm looking like even the last couple challenges that have happened this month, like the latest couple, it's interesting. Innovation's still happening. Like the red-black deck, there's that Discover version, which is more mid-rangey, but there's a red-black ramp deck that's playing 4 Brotherhood's End, 2 or 3 burn down the house, basically a control deck, blowing all the things up and trying to go either turn 2 Iron Crag, ramp into turn 3 big score into turn 4 7 mana play, or just turn 4 big score into untap 7 mana, and you're either playing Itali or Breach, and both of those cards are very good against the Atraxa decks, of course, right?
Yeah.
And Itali can
100%.
chain and hit another Itali, which hits a Breach, which and they also play a couple Chandra at the top end, which if you've not cast Breach with Chandra in play, it's a trip. So
good day.
those decks were almost specifically made to beat the 5-color deck, and I played it a bunch. Andrew Cuneo was actually, he came up with one good list a few weeks ago, and I was playing it. Boy, it's great against 5-color, but against everybody else, man, the die roll of Atraxa, Breach, or sorry, not Atraxa, Tally and Breach, it's a dice roll, and sometimes you completely whiff, and it feels like, oh my god, my deck did the thing. 7 drop on turn 5, and we whiffed, or I got a 2 drop off it. It's like, oh, I don't know. So those decks.
Oh yeah, no. When Itali is your win con, and your opponent's playing like a low to the ground, more controlling deck, it really stinks. When you're going up against Domain, though, exactly. When you're going up against Domain, you're probably going to find an Up the Beanstalk or a Leyline Binding. Like those are your biggest whiffs. But if you, like you're saying, if you hit that Atraxa off of their deck. There's something about Italiing into your opponent's Atraxa and then Atraxa drawing you a Breach the Multiverse for the next turn. It's like, all right, opponent, what you got?
So it's cool. There's a few decks, but the last couple of weeks has been interesting. There's been some aggro decks that have popped out of the woodwork. Last week, there was a Monastery Mentor deck that did well in one of the challenges, which was very interesting. That's a card that hasn't seen play in quite a while. But I guess is making a little bit of a return.
That deck's been doing well because of cards like Helping Hand and Recommission. It's more of a low to the ground reanimator deck, and then getting value off of casting all of those instants and sorceries. So like playing cards, like I said, Helping Hand reanimates a creature 3 mana value or less. So you're going from Monastery Mentor, Haughty Gen, or Halo Forager. And if you hit Halo Forager, you can recast the Helping Hand for 1 mana out of your yard to reanimate another one of those value 3 drops.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And
everything's very cheap.
Yes, and the Monastery Mentor trigger is just getting all of those 1/1 monks with prowess to then take advantage of playing cards like Consider and Sleight of Hand. And you can bin these 3 drops to the yard by playing Bitter Triumph, which is new from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, right? So it's very fun to play. It doesn't play a whole lot of lands. Most lists are 19 to 20 lands tops.
Oh, yeah.
Threat dense.
But don't worry, the Arena Shuffler is still coming after you, so that's fine.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I think those, when the curve tops out at 3, chef's kiss. I don't get to play more than 20 lands. I never flood. Consider finds me, whatever I need. And then people forget about cards like, my favorite version back in the day when the mono blue tempo deck was fairly good in standard. My favorite version was the version that played almost like a combo deck where it was very controlling, and then they used March of Swirling Mist to just, your opponent alpha strikes, I fog, untap, smack you, or fog you again with Mist, and then hit you. Like 2 hits with the Djinn is all it takes with that many spells in your deck. That March of Swirling Mist is so powerful in that deck. Even just for 1 mana, save my Monastery Mentor, which is such a lightning rod, right? That card just dies to everything, cut down, you name it. So you got to have some way to cheaply interact, and that deck's full of them. That deck looked very sweet. There's also a Toxic deck that's been kind of coming back, kind of white-based Toxic. So there's a banned version. One of the decks that just did well in the last challenge yesterday, as of recording this, that would be January 6th. did quite well. Bant Aggro, it's a toxic deck, which we haven't seen in a long time. Again, low to the ground, 22 lands, but playing a bunch of the white toxic creatures like Crawling Chorus, Skrelv, Jawbone Duelist, and then Venerated Rot Priest. I'm looking, and they're splashing blue here for March of Swirling Mist. Again,
Oh, yeah.
this card in the toxic deck is gross when you have this stupid Rot Priest in play. So these toxic decks suddenly coming back makes me very curious as to how the meta decks, the more established like 5-color ramp and stuff, are going to adapt. So these decks obviously preying on 5-color. Let's go fast. Let's go low. We're all 22 lands or less. You've seen the Demir tempo deck that just won the challenge last week, a well-known MTGO grinder. With this Demir tempo list that's really low to the ground, looks really good. Tishana's Tidebinder looks great. All your spells are really cheap. Urtai is great. All those cards are great against the 5-color deck. But I wonder how 5-color is going to pivot. So, like, as somebody who plays 5, I still think 5-color is the best deck, and one of the reasons why it's so versatile, right? When this is what we're doing. Oh, this is what they're doing to beat me. Okay, let's put the temporary lockdowns in the main deck. That card crushes crushes all these 19 land decks, right? So it's like, I wonder what's going to happen.
And it's interesting because all of these different versions of Domain are popping up to try to adjust to the metagame being designed to beat it. But also at the same time, Domain just preparing, hey, if it's 27-something% of the metagame, according to data, then we need to adjust to play a lot of the mirror matches game 1.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to play cards like Jace the Perfected Mind in the main instead of the sideboard. And a lot of the versions have been playing it in the sideboard because that's your win condition, right? Mill them out. And you see a lot of these other, like, some of the Demir decks too are playing Jace down the sideboard. It's like, if I can't beat the infinite depopulates and sunfalls and farewells, then I better mill them so they just have no cards. So yeah, I mean, and I'm excited to see Jace the Perfected Mind scene play because that's been gone for a little bit.
Well,
and it's definitely a powerful card.
Yeah, he's great. And you saw him in Worlds. At Worlds, there were a few pros who brought Esper Control, and they had Jace in the main deck that was specifically there to beat the 5-color decks. You even saw a few Jaces in the sideboard. I've been testing a bit on in Standard. I've been playing Explorer a lot for these qualifier play-ins, but we have been dabbling in Standard, and boy, the best sideboard cards in the mirror for me were, of course, Jace, like you mentioned, and Tishana's Tidebinder. So I found myself really leaning blue. And because this is the case, things like Negate and D-Stroke and stuff like D-Stroke especially fell completely off as soon as Cavern got printed. That was the big bump that put 5-color into that range that you said, now we're in bannable country. We're in bannable country now, right?
Yep.
So that everybody losing the D-Strokes. Now I'm tempted to start putting counter magic because now the most important card isn't Atraxa, it's Jace. And with Atraxa, it leads to all these interesting patterns in the game where when you cast Atraxa, you shouldn't be just taking the max cards off it every time, especially in the mirror. If I can take 5 cards, sometimes I'll only take 2. I don't need another Invasion of Zendikar. I don't need another land here,
Right.
Because I know this is going to come down to decking, or there's a high chance one of us is going to be able to have to stop playing 7 drops because they have 2 up the beanstalk in play, and it's like, oh crap. If I can't play Herd Migration or Atraxa because I'm in a deck, how am I winning this game? I can't, So it's like, I see players getting, like, I'll leyline an Atraxa gladly in the mirror, knowing they can leyline my leyline, get their Atraxa back, and I watch them do it and take 6 cards, and I'm like, great, Merry Christmas. And then they discard 2 cards, and I'm like, oh, what do they do? They're going to deck themselves, and sure enough, So the post-board games especially, I would say if anybody out there is, this is not only a match you have to be aware of if you're not playing this deck, but if you are playing this deck, you have to be aware of the mirror match. It's going to be very prevalent, like Favretto said. So don't be greedy with the card draw. Don't max take on Atraxa every time. The game's about Jace. Tidebinder's excellent as well. I'm siding in Negates for that reason as well, just to counter Jace. And to, they can't make Jace uncounterable off Cavern, right? It's only creatures. So
correct.
So it becomes about Jason. So suddenly Negate finding his way back in.
Naming Angel on Cavern isn't just for Atraxa. These decks are playing for Archangel. And Archangel has such a strong effect, like hitting 2 creatures off the board or killing a Planeswalker and having a 3/4 flyer behind afterwards. Card is great. It's been great since they printed that card. I remember playing that card in the Giada Angels deck when it first came out, just like playing some Mardu Angels, and it was great.
Yeah, and this card didn't get slotted in just because they were naming Angel and Cavern. This was this has been part of the deal for a long time.
It was the best thing to do when you have a bunch of mana and all the colors. And what's the best 6-drop we can play? It's not Sanctuary Warden or something. It's this thing. It's get immediate value.
You know, another deck I think that we can't go without mentioning is Mono Red. I know all of y'all that play Arena see it in the best of 1 queue, but it's actually an okay best of 3 deck too, and it's cheap to build in paper. You can get like the best Mono Red deck that's on Arena currently in paper for like less than $100 if you've never played Standard before. If you just wanted to jam an RCQ and you have your confidence and your skill as a Magic player and you can count to 20, you know, consider buying the Mono Red deck, because most of the cards are commons and uncommons that really make an impact in the matchup. You know, Kumano is great. Monastery Mentor is fantastic. Phoenix Shix is great. But I think the best card to happen to Mono Red in quite some time is Monstrous Rage from Wilds of Eldraine. That card is insane. For 1 red, you give your creature +2/+0, and a Monstrous Roll, which gives it +1/+1 and trample. You put that thing on a Monastery Mentor, you get the Prowess trigger on top of that, and that Monastery Mentor is attacking through a Sheoldred, right? And still dealing damage over top. And all that for 1 mana on attacks.
1 mana is very, very good.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane. And, you know, the other card that's really good in that deck is Godric, Cloaked Reveler, that cares about celebration and turning into a dragon, and then you can fire breathe it with all the excess mana you have later in the game.
Well, I thought when I saw this card, I'm like, come on, Celebration, like, yeah, there are turns where they play 2 Phoenix Chicks or, you know, a Kumano Phoenix Chick, but how it can't be that easy for them to enable this. No, with cards like you just mentioned, Monstrous Roll is 2 permanents, or Monsters Roll or whatever. No, Monstrous Roll is 1 permanent.
It puts 1 permanent.
Monstrous Rage. The Charming Scoundrel is just 2 permanents in 1, like that kind of stuff. And so it's trivially easy to enable this guy.
And the curve, if you hit Kumano Faces Kakazan on 1, by the time you have 3 mana, it's the turn it flips. So if you play Godric down, it just celebrates itself.
It's like playing Lotus. It's like playing suspending a Lotus Bloom or something. You know, like a few turns later, you're gonna have a huge turn. Well, you know, the other interesting thing about Mono Red, you know, we look at like the best deck in Standard playing 4 Archangels. You know, decks having a lot of built-in life gain. Herd Migration is just an awesome card against Mono Red. That makes me not want to play, and it makes me think, you know, this is why aggro isn't totally tier 1. However, as the decks and the metagame start bending over backwards to beat the 5-color deck because it's got such a disproportionate share of the winner's metagame, those other decks like Blue-Black Dimir, like Monastery Mentor, like all these other decks are very soft to red aggro. Dimir has a very tough time beating a bunch of other cheap threats that are just attack. All your cheap removal is very good against them, kills all their creatures, and just like, they don't have sweepers. They don't have life gain. Like, it's very tough for those decks to beat. Like, the thing 5-color decks are doing is putting 4 Knockout Blow in the sideboard. Knockout Blow is one of the best, maybe the best card, that and Sunset Revelry, to beat red. But nobody's outside of the 5-color deck, who's already very bad against Mono Red. Your win rate against them in game 1 is probably like 80%. They have to bring in 4 Knockout Blow. Everybody else doesn't have access to that card. Well, maybe some white decks do, but I don't know if they're sideboarding, you know, cards in against aggro. So aggro in a great spot right now. It lines up well against the other decks that are trying to also beat the 5-color deck. So we'll see how it goes. I wonder, you know, now that these pizza box tournaments are coming up, we're going to have another good source of data, which is great, because those usually cap at 128 players, which is pretty good. And a lot of players are wanting to do well in those to get to the Jankathon tournament and all that. So we'll see if maybe Mono Red shows up. Yeah.
And, you know, for sure, you know, in the pizza box tournaments, people are coming with a mix of decks that are metagame and their decks that they believe are going to beat the metagame. And sometimes you have some breakout decks that come from the pizza box tournaments.
It's true.
And then people start playing them on like Magic Online and taking them to other tournaments to where they're making an impact that just are decks that people never seen before. And that's the beauty of having a tournament that is free to play, doesn't cost you anything. Legit, you can sit and play in this 8-round tournament with some awesome coverage, I have to say, to
not
play your deck that you've been playing on the ladder. And I think the free aspect is one of the greatest things about it, because there's no chance for people to say, well, we can't participate in this because here's this barrier. It breaks that barrier. And if when you're finished playing, if you don't do so well, that's great. You can continue on with your day. And then awesome coverage continues from the other players' decks. And it's like, okay, well, next week I gotcha. You figure out what we're playing against, and then you play in the tournament the next time. Now, I know y'all haven't heard us say this for a little bit, but it's true. The Pizza Box tournaments are back.
It's happening.
Now that finally the direct challenge bug and the friend challenge bug all have been fixed. Thank you, by the way. And so we won't have this issue going into the Pizza Box tournament. So, Ham, I think you have a little graphic to bring up for us.
Yes, they're coming back, everybody. Yeah, they're coming back, and the first one is going to be on January 14th. And then we also have one on the 21st as well, both of which are standard, because standard's hot right now. It's in a good place. We're all having a good time. And it's standard RCQ season, so let's get into it, right? Like, that's the format people are focused on. And so they're free to play with cash prizes starting at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday. So January 14th, they're coming back. And I have had a little conversation with Pizza that if I didn't get an opportunity to step into the booth on the 14th, that we were going to have a problem. So fortunately, I know I'll be there. Chat about some. Yeah, I mean, I was just like, I'm going to be in that, right? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, okay, good. Then we don't have an issue. I'm glad we have an understanding.
Then I don't have to break your kneecaps.
I don't have to have words with my boys here about this. Yeah.
But this is the number one tournament that if you want to jump back into the ring, here we go. Come and bring whatever deck you want, whether it's a metagame deck, a deck you've been climbing the ladder with. Now's the time.
Absolutely.
These tournaments are available for you to sign up on MTG Melee. It's already there. Just make sure you make an account if you don't have one already, and then you can sign up for free. Both links are there on Hollywood Pizza's page, so you can sign up for those events.
Absolutely, and we have the link to that Melee account in the description of the show, so you'll be able to get there from there. Yep.
Yeah, and from my understanding, if there is interest, possibly in a future month, I hear that Hollywood Pizza might be hosting a Timeless tournament for folks to participate in too, for those who would like a little switch up every now and again. And hey, if the Pizza Box tournament is going to shape the Timeless metagame, I mean, hey, we're here for it.
It probably will. I mean, because there's not really any other tournaments. I mean, maybe there's some other content creators. I haven't looked on Melee for Timeless tournaments. I'm sure some people are trying to run them, but Hollywood's already got that base of, a lot of people know his tournament series, so it would be very easy to add, another format. Time to go check Miss Min's Twitter, and what's the latest? These are the changes to Luris Demir. Great.
That's it.
Time to go crush it.
Pretty much.
Wildcard check. Yeah.
Now,
Timeless
interestingly
is
enough,
the ultimate wildcard check. That is, that's the only concern that I would have about trying to run a Timeless event is the number of wildcards that people wouldn't necessarily have access to.
Yeah. Dude, when I was watching you, I was watching you in round 1, and then it ended. I flicked over to Reed Duke because he was also in it, right?
Yeah.
And he was playing Grixis Control, and people were asking him questions. Why 3 Inquisition of Kozilek in your deck? And he's like, well, it's rare, and I didn't want to spend the rare wild cards or something. Is it rare on Arena? I think it is, right?
It's part of Strixhaven's
he's
bonus sheet.
And this is Reed Duke going, I couldn't finish the deck, so I just threw in another Thoughtseize, and people are like, oh my god, yeah. It's like, I didn't have any more rare wild cards. He's a Hall of Fame pro.
Same is true for Brainstorm, Lightning Bolt, Swords to Plowshares.
I know.
Rares.
Dark Ritual, Counter Spell.
Obviously I don't know Reed Duke's personal finances, but talk about being able to justify dropping $10 for some wild cards, right? Like,
but he's like all of us. He's like,
right.
I don't want to spend money on this goofy format. This is not a real format. And
that's like with cards like the fetch lands and Brainstorm at rare on the client and things like that. It's like, do I want to? If I don't already have these cards lying around, do I want to invest in this? It's like,
well, and nobody had the fetches, right? You straight up had to just
they were
craft
brand new.
all those.
Yep. You just have to craft them.
Which is a lot of cards.
You either need to draft a ton of cons, or you have to be, or you have to craft them. Yeah.
Now, also worth mentioning on the same wild card issue, because they extended standard that extra year. I find that you have a lot of newer players who just came in Wilds of Eldraine and Lost Caverns of Ixalan, who now need to find some way to get wild cards to craft the older cards on Arena.
Yeah.
And so I do see that you're seeing a lot of people play with what they have because it would require a significant investment at this point. And Standard doesn't rotate until September, and that's after we have a few more sets enter Standard. And you know, that being said, in February, the beginning of February, we will have a new standard format a new standard set that enters. That's more Murders at Karloff Manor. So it would be interesting to see, because I think that's the first set that would take into consideration the extended standard, or was designed with the extended standard in mind.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how those cards interact with cards like Leyline Binding or the Tri-Lands or something like this, because the Tri-Lands honestly are the biggest thing about old standard, having almost perfect mana to be able to do whatever you want. I mean, Jetmir's Garden is like $20 in Paper Magic, right? A lot of the lands in Paper Magic are like $20 a piece, even though we're going into play in Paper Standard. So,
Shattered Sanctum is like $15. The Czech lands are worth a bunch of money, which is crazy. I was like, whoa, when I saw
surprisingly, the ones that were originally in Innistrad Midnight Hunt, they reprinted a bunch of them in the Doctor Who set.
Right.
And that was open. So a lot of like foil, like overgrown farmlands, they're like $4 or $5, right? Which is still kind of expensive. Haunted Ridge used to be a $25 land.
Yes.
And thanks to Doctor Who, now it's down to a couple bucks, which I'm thankful.
Yeah, it's only like 5 or 6 or whatever. So it's a bit.
Well, it's interesting. We'll see what happens. Yeah, because Standard, I mean, that's the money pile deck is always the 5-color deck. Just like in, Modern before Yorion was banned, not only was it 5-color, play all the best cards in the format, it was also 80-card deck. So it was like the most ridiculous, expensive deck you've ever seen. And for a lot of people, it's like, well, what do I do when that's the best deck? Like that, that barrier of entry is so frustrating, the monetary gate. So yeah, the 5-color deck in Standard, I mean, even on Arena, we're not talking cash here, but it's 40-something rares, right? Out of a 60 card, I mean, including sideboard, it's more than that, but it's, the main deck is 40-something rares, and that is, that's way more rares than a lot of people have. And, or if they, they want to have multiple decks, this is either I have to spend all the rares I've been saving for months on this one deck, or, which means I can't play Timeless. I can't.
According to MTG Goldfish, the domain deck from the most recent challenge that did well cost $606 in Paper Magic. If you wanted to RCQ it up and buy the domain deck, you don't have any of the cards, $606. Mono red. Mono red, though, you want to purchase it to play in a standard tournament, you can get away with playing the version that is $73.
Nice. There you go.
I like that. Let's do that.
Significant difference. Yeah.
And for a local, smallish RCQ, it's probably going to be competitive, I think for a larger event, like you get what you pay for in a way. There's a reason, like the 5-color deck is much better than mono red.
Sure.
But yeah, like compromise, best bang for your buck, take a shot. You might still win with mono red. It's a proactive deck. It punishes stumbles from your opponents. And so, yeah, a range of decks there. It's funny, like I've been playing Magic, especially competitive Magic, for so long now that I 600 doesn't even trigger me. Like when I got back in and Jace the Mind Sculptor was in Standard, and like I was playing, Teamer with Lotus Cobra and Jace, like going into Inferno Titan and stuff like that. And that deck was over $1,000 at that time. And that was like, whoa, standard deck 1,000. We're hitting a barrier here. $1,000 is too much for a standard deck, which of course is ludicrous. Yes, I agree, for a deck that rotates in a couple of years. But now that the rotation has been extended to 3 years, I think $700, $800, $1,000 standard decks are going to become more and more normal. I think we're going to see more of that stuff happen, especially as the format gets bigger.
To put it in perspective, so that's the top standard deck, top dollar amount. You can spend $14 more, $620, and purchase Mono Green Tron in Modern.
Oh wow, in Modern.
And if you want the Rakdos mid-range deck, which is the top deck in Pioneer, that costs $600. Or Is It Phoenix? You can spend half the price of a standard deck and fully buy the Is It Phoenix deck in Pioneer,
which doesn't rotate.
Correct.
Right, which never won. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it goes to show you, standard's always been kind of pricey. I mean, because it's a bubble, right? And as soon as all those cards rotate, they all plummet. Usually, I mean, these
Oh
days,
yeah.
it's weird though with power creep and everything. More and more cards
Mm-hmm.
are still holding their value. Like, I mean, I don't know. But we're still talking a small percentage of all the
Well,
big expensive cards, right?
this is true, and I think a lot of it too, as far as the pricing is concerned, if a
Mhm.
card is valuable in standard, it's really it tends to only be valuable in standard. Like if you look at old school bangers, like I remember a time when Riptide Mangler was like $15 because there was one deck. Yeah, yeah, exactly, David. That reaction is exactly what I expected. This card isn't even modern legal because it's too old. It was from Legions.
Yeah.
It was like it was Delver before Delver. It's an 0/3 for 1 and a blue, where you can pay 1 and a blue and change its power to target creature's power.
Oh my god!
Right? It's like
interesting. You know,
this card's worth a nickel now, and nobody cares because it's not. You know, it's nothing but in that one standard at that one time it was worth something, right? And so obviously we have cards right now that are really good in standard, like your Rafine and Wedding Announcement, that are like real bangers in the current environment, or the cards like Up the Beanstalk having to get banned in modern. You know, like that's becoming. You know, if it gets banned in every other format, then it'll become only valuable in standard. But even Commander players want that. And the thing that I'm not surprised by, of all the lands that we have going on right now, I'm not surprised the slow lands are the ones that are demanding a really high price tag because they're also phenomenal in Commander.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. In that format where you're going to have a lot of lands down, these are basically just untapped duels.
Yep.
You know, like almost pretty much every Commander deck wants these if you're in multi-color.
They need to start printing more value at rare like that, good lands like this. Mm-hmm. Like this is you know, there have been bad cycles of the Snarls, and there were some bad cycles of lands, the Choked Estuary, and I can't remember what those
the Strixhaven lands, right?
And there's those.
Avacyn, whatever, restored ones.
Well, I wish they were a little bit better at some of that stuff, but
I don't know. There are some old school ones. There are a handful. I don't know. You guys remember the uncommon cycle from Kamigawa, where if you tapped them for a colored mana, they didn't untap during your next untap step. You just like them. Remember these?
See, those are like uncommon
pain lands. Like
yeah, so it's funny, you know, power creep, like drafting cons and stuff. I listened to the podcast last couple of weeks. You guys were talking about cons at one point, I think. Oh, when Headology was on. Yeah, you guys were talking. It was very, very interesting to see this set come back that I fondly remember. And of course, at that time, Siege Rhino was very powerful in standard and all these cards that were very busted, you know. And then seeing them again in the game and playing with them again and interacting with them, it's so funny how our perceptions have changed regarding power. Like this card was the best card in standard at one point, and now it's like it's okay in draft. You know, like that's it. Like it's not even. It's hard to cast even in draft. It's like, okay, I'll take this. I might splash it, but the draft was great. And so a lot of players were complaining about this. I know in Limited, a lot of players were just like, oh my God, vanilla creatures? Like, when's the last time you've seen a vanilla creature in Magic?
My 4/2 bear.
Like, yeah, or my 2/1 for 2. And it's like,
there's one vanilla creature that we all know and love.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Only vanilla creature that is currently legal in standard, by the way. Yargle and Multani. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a great. I like that design on that card for what it's worth. But
vanilla cards, that's what it takes.
I think they were. You know, I'm playing with it. It brought something back. I was like, yeah, this is like slow Magic. This is like Magic the way it kind of was. Like nobody's playing a 1/1 flyer for one that also makes a map and like generates value, and you're like, oh my God, like everything feels like. Everybody has more time to do everything. Everything is more ponderous or something. I don't know how to describe it. It was so interesting to do that again. A lot of new players hated that. A lot of new players who had never played sets like that were like, this sucks. What? Like my deck, nobody's deck does anything to like turn 3 and then you play a morph? Like, what is this? Yeah, like that's great. Like,
they weren't even excited to play Hooting Mandrills. Like, are you kidding me?
I don't understand kids these days. Anyway. So it was just interesting to see that kind of thing happen. And especially, we talk about old cards and reprints. I mean, hey, we've got Ravnica Remastered coming out. I know you guys covered a bunch of the new things already in last episode, but you know, Modern Horizons 3 is coming. For me, that's a big deal this year. The biggest, maybe. That and the play boosters. Those are the two biggest things on the slate. And they're two very different things. The play booster is going to affect obviously only in real life Magic, but Modern Horizons is going to affect real life and Arena, and I'm really curious. I mean, I look at Modern now, and over 50% of the top 10 creatures are from the last Modern Horizons sets, the last one and the previous one. And we all know, Fury getting banned, and these kind of cards. People arguing for basically the whole cycle of elementals to get banned. It begs the question: what is coming in Modern Horizons 3? Is it going to be super busted and all that stuff? We'll see. I'm very excited to see how that impacts. Timeless.
I don't know if I mentioned this before on the cast. I probably did. But I said that for Modern Horizons 3, and for the amount of kind of outrage on not doing the bans properly, because hey, Scam is still a deck even though they banned Fury. I think it's a good time for them to make a big splash and unban Splinter Twin in Modern, and then print serialized Splinter Twins in Modern Horizons 3. So that way there's a hype for everybody to get their hands on this Splinter Twin. But more seriously, I probably will think that we're going to have a whole cycle of more free spells because they've already entered that black hole of nothingness. And they're going to be super overpowered every other set that they have been. And it's sad, but I think that's pretty safe to say that they're going to do that.
Yeah, we'll see. That's what I'm worried about, is exactly that, right? Like they keep pushing, and when you look at Modern, like I said, well, a few months ago it was the top 8 out of 10 creatures were from the Modern Horizon sets. In all of Modern spans 87 sets. For those of you who don't realize, it's many, many, many sets, and all 8 out of 10 of the top creatures are from the last one or two. Well, Lord of the Rings came out, and that was a big deal. But so it was Modern Horizons and Lord of the Rings basically dominating, the top 10. And then Modern Horizons 3 comes out. I feel like, pretty soon, this eternal format is just going to be made up of cards printed in the last few years, which is interesting. So it's interesting also, to divert a little bit. I've been watching a lot of Vintage Cube. I love Vintage Cube, and LSV famously has this YouTube channel now where he's been putting a lot of drafts, and I've been watching his Vintage Cube drafts since for 15 years, over way back when he's free, because I didn't know anything about Vintage Cube. That's how I learned to draft and learned the combos and different synergies in Vintage Cube. And even in Cube, it is crazy to see the best non-powered cards, not the Mox's Lotus, Time Walk Ancestral, or Soul Ring, or Mana Crypt cards, be commander cards, be Fourth Eolingus, and Currency Converter. And he's first picking these cards over crazy powerful other stuff, and it's and the Sticker Goblin, and there's some cards that are so powerful that I don't know, are being thrown into Magic, and the way they keep pushing and stuff, I don't know. It's the best cards even in Vintage Cube are from the last couple of years. Never mind, And I really like the way they synergize. Sometimes they have real cool synergy with the old cards, but it is weird to see Vintage Cube devolve into a bunch of decks that are basically just individually powerful cards that just stand on their own. I mean, Fable of the Mirror Breaker is another great card that just goes in every Vintage Cube deck because it's enables all the crazy stuff. It slots in right alongside everything else on the curve. And back in the day, Vintage was very tough because it was a lot of synergy based decks. The ones that really synergized the best were doing really broken stuff, like the Storm deck and Reanimator and all this kind of thing. Life from the Low, or not Life of Recurring Nightmare and Survival of the Fittest. It was grindy, Now it's just, cast Fourth Eolingus. Get the initiative. Here's the initiative guy. Now what? Go.
You mean to tell
probably
me
win.
That Vintage Cube has evolved into building the best 40 card commander deck you could make? Because let me tell you, even in friends of mine's Vintage Cubes that they make in paper, the most powerful cards by far are these random commander cards. And I think that speaks not only to the power level of commander cards they've continued to print in these sets that are making the precons super playable out of the box, just to play in your casual commander pod, that they're having that much of an effect on these cubes is definitely telling.
Yeah, they slot right in there along with Black Lotus and Mox Sapphire and crazy Time Walk and stuff. They're right up there with So it's interesting to see, at least in Vintage Cube, you can curate it and stuff. But I worry about Legacy and other things. And like I said, Modern Horizons is going to be It's going to be wild. I wonder how far they're going to push it, and I wonder what it's going to do to the format. Legacy and modern, of course, because it's legal in both. So
you do have another direct to modern set too coming this year. Is the
Really?
Assassin's Creed set.
Goes
That's printed
modern
directly into modern.
Oh, I thought that was like a Doctor
realize that.
Who, like weird, like for
It is
Commander
in the
only.
sense that there's only one kind of booster for it. But those cards do go direct to modern.
In modern. Oh, very interesting. Okay, I didn't actually know that. So, yeah, I wonder what's going to come there. That'll be because with the Universes Beyond, are they extra incentivized to really push it? Because it's a big brand and they want it to do well and they want the relationship to, with Ubisoft or whatever to do well. I mean, that's why they did the Lord of the Rings thing with the lottery with the golden Wonka, Charlie Chocolate Factory ticket. That was genius marketing. They sold more packs of that set than any other set in history. And so I don't know, being a Universes Beyond thing, is that extra incentive for them to really push the envelope even more than they normally do? I wonder. So hopefully not. But sorry, Ham, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, you're fine. No, this is all. I have so many thoughts here. It's funny. Like the reality is that Assassin's Creed, that whole Assassin's Creed thing. By the time we are done with this podcast, I will probably forget that product's coming out. I forget, I just every time it was just Universes Beyond, Assassin's Creed. It's just like that. That product in my brain is like water off of a duck's back. I just forget about it constantly. Because the thing about that product that blows my mind is the reason people like Assassin's Creed is because it's running around stabby action in history. Like, it's the gameplay that get people coming back. I don't think anybody is like, oh man, I can't wait to see what Desmond is up to, or like, oh, I wonder what happened with Ezio. I don't know.
Maybe
does anybody care about the characters in Assassin's Creed? I don't know. We'll see. But
I'm sure there's a fandom out there. I don't know how big it is. That's what's so strange. I don't know how much crossover there is with Magic. What I dislike is inconsistency in their releases. Like when they release a Doctor Who product or a Fallout product, which is coming out in a couple months, that is Commander only, casual only. Okay, great. And then for them to go, but this one isn't. This one's in modern. It's like, wait, what? Why is this one randomly in modern? None of the other ones are in modern. Like, there's no rhyme or reason. There's no consistency there, and it's very confusing. Like, I literally didn't even know that until Freddo just said that. I just assumed because these other sets are not going to modern. Why would that one randomly be? I don't understand it. Like,
but they will be in their own type of booster and also not draftable. So so people just need to buy the product if they want their Assassin's Creed cards for modern.
I'm good. I'll stick with the games.
The wrist blade is going to be some equipment that is the greatest thing that has ever existed. It's going to be it's going to be GTA levels of power, and it's going to absolutely warp modern, and they're going to sell a bunch of packs off of it. And that's my prediction. I have maybe it's not the wrist blade, but there's going to be a card. There's going to be an Orcish Bowmaster in that set, and it is going to be a massive pain. And we've gotten to a point where it almost feels like I'm just kind of piecing this together now. So if this is a totally half-baked idea, well, feel free to rail on me in the comments, please. That'd be great. But it almost feels like super powerful modern staples are becoming the full art basics that were in the unsets to sell packs. Like, it's almost like we don't know if this set's going to sell very well, so let's just jam a modern warping card into it, and people will have to buy them.
That is traditionally how packs were sold, right? I mean, they designed Aaron Forsyth has gone on the record multiple times talking about this, with Jace the Mind Sculptor being the first planeswalker with 4 abilities. They really wanted to sell packs of Worldwake. We had Zendikar, which was very well received. New fetch lands, this was mind-blowing. There had been no fetch lands for so long. How do you follow that up? How do we get people to buy Worldwake? Well, let's just make a chase marquee card that is just really pushed, like extra pushed. And that was how Jace was born. And then they did it again with Sorin. I believe it was 4-mana Sorin and Intangible Virtue back when Block Constructed was a format. And there were Pro Tours and qualifiers and PTUs in Block Constructed. And they wanted to sell packs of Innistrad. One of the Innistrad, it was the second Innistrad set. And they pushed, he went on record and said, we pushed it way too, the tokens thing, we pushed way too hard. We just needed a way to sell these packs. It was Sorin. that one. And they ended up getting banned, not in standard, but in Block Constructed. Intangible Virtue got banned, I think. But anyway, they went on record and said basically they pushed some of these cards to sell packs. So that's nothing new. So what you said is probably yes. Like if they want to sell packs of Assassin's Creed, they're gonna push some card. There has to be at least one Charizard in there for people to go for some chase card. And the risk is they're gonna have to ban it if it's too good. Like if we push it too hard and then it's $100 card, but it's seeing play everywhere. Like just don't make it colorless, please. Like don't Karn, those kind of Smuggler's Copter. We know how dangerous those cards can be. Like I just hope they but we'll see.
Well, and that's what makes me concerned though, because I mean the Wrist Blade is the iconic weapon from that set or from that franchise, and that colorless. Sounds like a cheap colorless equipment to me. So
I'm worried.
We'll see. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll see what happens. I think Standard's great right now. I don't know if you guys, for those of you out there, there are other competitive events happening on Arena right now. I've been playing a lot of Explorer because there are qualifier play-ins happening. Just yesterday, January 6th, was the best of one qualifier play-in. They change the format all the time. Right now, it's Explorer for some reason. And I want to play Standard. I really do want to play Standard, but I've been playing Explorer to get ready for this qualifier. I'm going to be taking a couple of shots. Next week is the best of 3. And then if you qualify, if you get the play-in qualifier, you do well enough, you get into the qualifier itself. And then if you do well in the qualifier, you make day 2 and do well, you get entered into the Arena Championship on March 30th, which is $200,000 prize pool, a very large tournament. And it's technically free to get into, but you have to grind these qualifiers. So I've been playing a little Explorer to try and get ready for this, and what a bizarre format. I mean, Pioneer was the RCQ season that just wrapped up. So we had some big regional championships happen just at the end of December, culminating in Atlanta, I think was the last big one in the States. 1,300 players, got a lot of data from that. Really interesting to see the metagame shifts, blah, blah, blah. And then you jump over to Explorer where, Smuggler's Copter doesn't exist on Arena, and Temporal Trespass isn't on Arena. And, there's these like 1 or 2 pieces from a lot of these decks that are missing on Arena. And it's such a weird, like pseudo, it's not Pioneer. It's like a weird pseudo Pioneer, like a weird metagame that's, you try and use the data that we have from Pioneer and try and extrapolate it and use it in Explorer. And it just, it doesn't line up. Like it's weird. And so I don't know if you guys have played this format recently.
It's kind of an Uncanny Valley thing. Like it's close, but it's just not
so weird.
Right.
It's not there. Yeah.
I will tell you the reason I haven't played Explorer more on Arena is simply because I can't play my Pioneer deck there. They need, and one issue I took with them adding Timeless to Arena before finishing Pioneer, or at least tournament legal or tournament playable Pioneer. It didn't make any sense to me. And they had just added Khans of Tarkir to Arena in full, which made you able to play the actual Phoenix deck. But then they unbanned Smuggler's Copter and didn't even put it on Arena.
In Kaladesh remastered. Yeah.
Right. And so, and the reason they didn't have it in Kaladesh remastered was because it was banned at the time, so they didn't bother to put it on Arena.
Okay.
So if you wanted to test out your Pioneer deck, you can't then test it against the Smuggler's Copter decks. So I wish they would fix that. Because to be honest, the Rakdos decks, which number 1 deck in the format, plays Smuggler's Copter with Inti and Preacher the Schism. So
now you're seeing
it's got to be there. And I think that would bring a lot more people to play that format on Arena if they can play their full Pioneer deck. So
it's making it very weird. People are trying. They're basically taking the Rakdos deck with Smuggler's Copter and just taking out the Smuggler's Copter and jamming Bankbuster or some other thing, which doesn't line up the same as it does with the Inties and everything else if it's Smuggler's Copter. So this is what I mean. It's this weird, like, people are taking the lists and then just, it's missing this card. Okay, what can we use in that slot instead? It's like, that's not a way to build decks. You have to deconstruct a whole bunch of other stuff now that's kind of built around using the Copter. You can't just swap it. Like, that's not, it's going to be weird. So that's what's happening. It's this weird hybrid of like, people are trying to play these decks. And some of them are there. Amalia Combo is very powerful and is basically on Arena. I think somebody said it's missing one random sideboard card maybe still or something, but that deck
Okay,
is
but
very
that's
powerful. But
yeah.
anyway, so Explorer, for those of you out there trying to play the qualifier play-in, Blue-Red Phoenix is an excellent choice now. They got Treasure Cruise, which is obviously massive. The Amalia combo deck's amazing. Red-Black mid-range is still one of the best decks. It's got to be those three for the best decks. And then Blue-White Control, I think, is very good on Arena as well. It's got basically all of the pieces it needs. We just got Dig Through Time, which was the last thing it was missing. It also picked up Get Lost, one of the best removal spells for Blue-White maybe ever printed for Blue-White Control here, aside from Swords of Plowshares and stuff. You know, I'm talking in Pioneer. In Pioneer, it's got to be one of the best removal spells Blue-White's ever had. Way better than Fateful Absence, and I hate that card. But yeah, so the Blue-White decks are very good right now, not just because they picked up a couple of very good tools. They are also very good, line up very well against the Malia combo. You're able to kill their 2-drops easily with Temporary Lockdown. Temporary Lockdown, just the best Wrath in the format right now. It's so
for sure.
good. I think it's going to tick up in standard too. Like we were saying, if the tempo decks start rising up, which they are right now already, to beat 5-color. In 5-color, my list, I'm playing, 2 Depop, 3 Sunfall, 1 Farewell as the sweeper package. A lot of people are playing 4 Sunfall, no Farewell. Sure, you can debate that. But the 2 Depop, I'm switching for 2 Temp Lockdowns, I think. And we're just going to rock the Temp Lockdown main. Love this card. Yeah, we'll see.
I'm not about to tell you you're wrong. That's
well, I've been playing a bunch of Blue-White Control in Explorer as well, and it's just been so good there. I'm just like, this card's great. But
I love the idea of hitting Get Lost, blowing up, one of their bigger threats, and then using a temporary lockdown, remove their little things and the map tokens that you gave them.
Oh, the tokens, the artifacts, obviously would be great against Smuggler's Copter if it was on Arena, but it's just as good against Bankbuster. Maybe worse because they get to draw usually at least once, but you get to eat, like against Rakdos Sacrifice and other decks, you just wipe all their stuff, even the things that come back from the yards. So yeah, it's been very good. Blue-White's good. I dabbled with Blue-Red Drakes, which is a very sweet Pioneer deck. If somebody's looking to do a different take on the Phoenix deck, maybe you don't have those mythics to craft the Phoenixes. The Blue-Red Drakes deck, Crackling Drake, basically you're playing a Phoenix. Those Phoenix decks are basically Lightning Bolt Treasure Cruise decks. That's all they are. You're a Lightning Bolt Treasure Cruise shell, and you can either have a nice recursive Phoenix package in there, or you can use Drake, which gets around the graveyard hate that your opponents bring in against you, because this card obviously counts cards in exile, which is a lot of what the Blue-Red Phoenix decks are doing, is siding out some of the Phoenixes, bringing in the Drakes post-board to avoid, losing to Rest in Peace and or Grafdigger's Cage. This deck already does that by playing the Drake's main. You get to play Grafdigger's Cage in your sideboard in this deck, which is amazing. You bring in Grafdigger's Cage in the mirror against the other deck, or you bring it in against the Amalia combo deck and you shut off all of their Collected Companies, Court of Callings, Return to the Ranks, all that stuff. It's lights out. The Phoenix deck can't side in a Gravedigger's or a Grafdigger's Cage.
No.
So this deck can, and it was very good. 19 land, very low to the ground. You're not playing 12 cantrips. You've got 10 cantrips, but you got a bunch of shocks. You also get to play better removal. One of the big problems with the Blue-Red Phoenix deck is as soon as creatures get to 6 toughness, that deck can't kill them, and it has a huge problem with it. So you're seeing red-black Rakdos decks, the mid-range versions, playing more Archfiend of the Dross. You're seeing them also play more Croxas these days, because that 6 toughness is impossible for the Phoenix deck to beat. They have Lightning Axe, and that's it. They've got a 2-for-1 themselves to try and kill one of these big guys. And you notice when you play, if you're playing the Phoenix deck and you're playing against the Rakdos mid-range deck, a lot of times they'll play that first Croxa and it doesn't really do anything, but then it's sitting in the graveyard and you're just like, shit. And you're looking at it and you're like, I know eventually that thing's going to come back. I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. I can't, like, I have to 2-for-1 myself, and then like, so the Drake's deck gets around this by playing things like one of Beacon Bolt, which does a ton of damage. I've killed a 22/22 Amalia with a Beacon Bolt before.
Oh yeah.
That's
a classic tech.
Oh yeah, because again, it counts in exile, so you don't care if they bring in graveyard hate, and this thing just stays in your graveyard and keeps coming back unless they can nab it. And you get to blow up. Yeah, that deck just puts so many spells in the yard so quickly that this thing does. The 6 toughness creatures don't matter. This and Blitz of the Thunder Raptor is the other one that just it does damage equal to the amount of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. So it's beautiful. This blue-red Drake's deck is very nice. Go and try and find a list, or I can even maybe post a link or give you a link for the description for these decks if you want to try them. Yeah. If people are trying to qualify in these Explorer events, good luck. They are happening next week is the best of 3. So if anybody's trying it, well, you can check out my channel for a couple of VODs. But otherwise, it's tough to find people playing Explorer. I switch to Explorer when I stream, and my viewership gets cut in half. I notice, or when I draft, or it's just the formats. People want to see you play, and a lot of people come in and go, "What is this? Is this historic?" And I'm like, no, this is Explorer. They're like, what's Explorer? And I'm like,
that?
How do I answer that? It's like almost it's kind of well,
it's funny you mention that, because this past week I've been playing a ton of Timeless, and my audience is oftentimes Standard and like janky brewers in Standard. So I always love it. It was like, hey, what's up, everybody? We playing Standard as my opponent has a Dragon Rage channeler. Like, it's done a mental bubble. Like, not even for a second. Absolutely not. Yeah.
But see, the nice thing, I think there is a lot of overlap between casual anything and Timeless. It is a casual format, even though it's very powerful. It's historic brawl. Like, there's a lot of overlap between the players who like doing the big powerful stuff, and
100%. It is appealing to folks with a casual mindset. Yeah, in a way that some of these other. Well, and it's weird because Explorer and Historic are kind of in this halfway spot where, like, there's a bigger card pool. There's kind of room to be creative, but the folks who are playing it are probably playing it because there's an upcoming event that they want to, have a good shot in. And so it ends up being a very competitive environment, just kind of by the nature of who's playing there. And I don't know. That's why it's interesting.
I'd like to see it turn into a real format. At least then there'd be a reason to play Explorer. Like, they could actually tie it to, if Pioneer RCQ season comes back around at some point, which it will, now people can test on Arena for that. Whereas currently they can't, like, unless they finish off the format, it's not going to matter. Like, these events, this play-in stuff, like, I'm just doing it because they're making me, basically, right? Like, if it was any other format, I would be playing that. But anyway, so we'll.
Yeah, that's kind of the funny thing. I think people want to be playing Pioneer, but since, but if we don't, because we don't have Pioneer on Arena, it's either we play Explorer or Historic, and which one would you rather have?
Yeah.
Like, well.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Maybe someday. We'll see.
Hopefully.
After
Hopefully
we release Explorer Anthologies 6, whatever's the next one.
7, 8, 9, and 10. Then we'll.
And maybe the next Explorer Anthology will have Smuggler's Copter.
I like that Jedi mind trick you just pulled there. Smuggler's Copter. He's waving his hand in front of the camera almost to tell the wants.
Yes. Please, Wizards of the Coast, give us Smuggler's Copter.
The format.
This is the card you're looking for. Here we go.
So we'll see.
No question what we're talking about.
it would just be nice to have another sanctioned format on Arena. That's all. We have 5 constructed formats. I mean, I guess 6 if you count Historic Brawl. One of them is relevant in terms of real life analog and qualifying for things. And it would be nice to have just one more, please. Like, Pioneer would be great. I'd love to jump into Modern someday on Arena or other formats, but I don't, we'll see. I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
They're starting to integrate more and more into Arena. Like Modern Horizons 3 you mentioned earlier. That is going to be coming to Arena. We will have Modern Horizons 3. It will be playable in Timeless and presumably
we
Historic.
Have fetch lands now.
Yep,
and
they're not fetch lands. So I think getting to Modern, at least like playable constructed Modern, isn't as unbelievable as it could be. There's also there are a couple of examples of cards that recently were included in Arena to like zero fanfare. They didn't make a big deal about it, but with Lost Caverns of Ixalan, they took the face commanders from the commander precons and put them into Arena. So like Pantlaza Sun Favorite, if you want to play a Pantlaza Historic Brawl deck, you can. That is a legal card on Arena. It's a mythic because that's the color of the symbol they decide to put on it.
So how do you get this card? You just have to craft it. There's no pack you can open. Yeah, they just put it on. Oh wow. Huh.
Yeah, and all of the face commanders from the commander precons are on there now, which is just there was no reason for them. Well, but they also, I don't even think they made an announcement about it. I think they just kind of like put them out there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
somebody
I didn't know.
on my channel was like, yeah, why don't you put Pant Lazo in this Brawl deck? It's like, what are you, and sure enough, fired it up and there it was, like, not
When did
uncrafted, but
this?
available. It's like,
This is the
wow.
LCI precons, the
Mhm.
LCI
Lost
Commander
Cameras of Ixalan
precons.
precons. They're in the,
Yeah, because
yep.
you're right. For casual, I mean, clearly they know how many casual players play on Arena. Like it's mostly casual players. Like more of the competitive players are on MTGO, I imagine. But
Right.
so they create timeless. They create formats like this for casual players. Yeah, you would think they would put all the casual cards on Arena as they come
Yeah.
out, but
But
maybe
the
it's a
thing that I don't
resource thing.
understand then is they added like 5 of these legendary creatures that all have very unique, goofy effects. They throw those
Mhm.
on with no problem, but they can't program Smuggler's Copter? Like,
Well, yeah, like I feel that's why it makes me
like they
that
introduce
the way
flood
that whole thing
counters
played
and
out.
they don't. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't.
It
I don't
felt
know.
to me like the ban or the unban of Smuggler's Copter was a last minute decision. It must
Mhm.
have been. Otherwise, they would. I can't imagine a reason they deliberately would not have put Smuggler's Copter in Kaladesh Remastered unless they didn't know they were going to unban Smuggler's Copter. That was only a
Mm.
few months before they unbanned Smuggler's Copter. So to me, it just smacks of last minute. You know what? Like bannings are bad. Let's throw them a bone. What can we give them here? Well, we were talking about maybe unbanning Smuggler's Copter. Sure, do it. Like, I don't know. I don't know what was said in behind closed doors, but that's what it feels like to me. That's what it looks like, because otherwise it makes zero sense. Yeah.
Well, you mean to tell me
Uh,
that Wizards of the Coast wasn't perfectly coordinated and deliberate
yeah.
in their actions? No way.
So
No way.
yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe as the last thing to wrap it up,
Yeah.
speaking of not being clear in their actions and stuff, we were chatting a little bit about the whole AI debacle, and you mentioned, do we want to talk about
Yeah, we can
this?
absolutely
I
touch
mean,
on that. I
to
think
me,
we'd be
so
remiss if we didn't. Yeah.
right, and I didn't like. I had heard some inklings. People were saying like, "Oh yeah, the AI thing." I saw a couple posts on Reddit and stuff, but I didn't really go too deep. I didn't. I'm not on Twitter really, so I don't. Thank God, I don't follow any of
Yeah,
the
it's for the
drama
best.
or
Yeah.
whatever happened. So, what exactly happened? And I know there was some, like, to me, it smells of just misinformation and bungling on Wizards' part. Like, I don't know if there's anything nefarious going on, but why don't you tell us what happened here first? Yeah.
Yeah, so the 10,000 foot view here is they recently put out a promotion really encouraging people to get, or trying to get people excited about Ravnica Remastered. If I'm not mistaken, it was the old Borderlands that are going to be reprinted in
Mhm.
Ravnica Remastered. Cool cards, cool reprints, great. They put out a promotional image showing the cards as though they were leaning on like kind of like Victorian era kind of device, right? And it had it had wires and big Edison bulbs on it. And it was very obvious the moment you looked at any of the finer details. When you first glanced at the image, I don't know about you guys, but my immediate thought was just like, oh, this is kind of a cool aesthetic, neat. And then you can't help but notice little like incongruities and the little things that kind of make you go, huh? And
Do we have an image? Do we have this image, or did they
I
immediately took
tried to
it
pull
down?
it.
But is it out there?
Wizards pulled it down. I have no doubt we can find it.
It's the internet. It's got to be out there
Yeah,
somewhere, right? But cause I haven't even seen it. I don't know, but yeah, what
yeah,
Ham was saying, like while he's looking for this, yeah,
yeah.
apparently
I'll
this
find it.
thing was full of little incongruities in the background, dials that didn't have numbers or they were blurred, or like
Mm-hmm.
wires going to nowhere and things like this. So very clearly, the online community can see this very clearly right off the bat, and
Yep,
they say something. They kind of
they
get
did.
angry at Wizards. So then what happens next? Wizards responds and
Wizards
says,
responds so within moments of this image, within minutes of this image going live, people responded saying, "Why are you using AI art in your marketing material?" And this is also coming like a week after they made a big deal about not using AI art
yes.
in
They
any.
made an official
They made an
announcement.
official
Yeah.
statement that they would not use AI art. I did find the image. Here we go.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
wow.
they made a big deal about not using AI art in any card art. That was the official statement, which I don't know about you guys, but it kind of implies like we don't condone the use of AI art. We will not use AI art moving forward is kind of my understanding of what that means.
Mhm.
And then they put out this promotional image. And it's not super clear at first, but you'll notice like when you start looking at it, I mean, for one, like the filaments in the bulbs are kind of odd, but the biggest thing, I think the most damning piece of evidence for me anyway, was in the dial.
So for those of you at home who are just listening, audio version of the podcast, we'll put maybe a link to this image, or no, I guess we can't do that. I don't know, but
no, we can't. But
image
on our YouTube channel, the MagicJank YouTube channel, there's a video version. Feel free to,
you can check
out there. You can fast forward to this part, and you'll see it. And honestly, if you just look on social media, or just Google MTG AI, you'll find it.
So what about this dial is so weird?
The thing about the dial is the numbers and whatnot look okay until you get to the top right corner. There is this like weird artifacting where it appears to be blurred. And at first I thought, okay, maybe that's an artistic choice, as though that's the spot where the needle normally is, and it's just kind of rubbed away over time. But that doesn't look like wear and tear. It looks like a computer failing to recognize a pattern correctly, right. is what it looks like to me. And the community basically said the same thing.
The other thing that people had pointed out in this artwork, or whatever you want to call this, is that there are some plugs in this art or wires that do not go to a plug that would normally. And there seemed to be, and I'm not sure because I don't use Photoshop, I'm very tech illiterate, but there are tons of inconsistencies in terms of like the shelving that's in the back, like by the window, that seems to be touched up by an AI software of some kind. On the back right corner of the image, back by that window, is where you would see that. And someone had pointed out on Twitter that it looks like Photoshop's AI tool not being able to do this properly. But yeah, in any event, immediately there was tons of backlash on this on Twitter, and I'm sure other social media outlets saying, hey, didn't you just say we weren't going to use AI? But some folks did point out that their statement said on final Magic product. So I guess if they wanted to be really in particular, is this considered a final Magic product, or is this just like some promotional image that they are using? But in any event, this caused a lot of backlash, even from artists who had done work for Wizards of the Coast, including causing somebody to issue a final quit letter to WotC and say, listen, I just won't be working with you anymore.
This is an artist that has done many iconic pieces for Magic.
That created Green Sun Zenith. If you all know of that image in the past,
the artist David Raposa did make a formal statement saying, hey, this isn't okay. And basically, like throughout the course of if you read the thread, he basically makes it clear, like, hey, I do freelance work with a lot of different companies, and you guys are the only ones doing this kind of crap, and I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to put up with it.
Stand up against it. I mean, and again, like the loophole, even if that is true, even if there was that loophole of them saying we're only going to use the AI art on our finished products, but we're not going to use it anywhere else, it kind of defeats the purpose of making a stand in the first place. Yeah, you're making a stand against using this kind of stuff, but only in this one product. But then we use it all the time over here. Like, well, then that's not a stand. You're not taking a stand against anything here. So very weird.
And so the community came out in a lot of backlash, which caused Wizards to release an additional statement, actually saying and doubling down and saying there's no AI art here. A human prepared this piece of artwork, but then additional backlash happened, saying, well, then can you credit the artist? Like, who created this image if it was a human?
Which is another thing. You should be crediting your artist regardless. Or at the very least, that information should be available. I understand not every promotional poster, needs to have like a clear, prominent artist credit. But like if people ask, you should be able to provide that.
Oh, yeah.
And so as of today, Wizards did release another statement on Twitter and took down their previous posts, so they don't exist out there. And it says, well, we made a mistake earlier when we said that the marketing image we posted was not created using AI. And then they said, as you are Digilant community pointed out, it looks like some AI components that are now popping up in industry standard tools like Photoshop crept into our marketing creative, even if a human did the work to create the overall image. While the art came from a vendor, it's on us to make sure that we are living up to our promise to support the amazing human ingenuity that makes Magic great. We already made clear that we require artists, writers, and creatives contributing to the Magic TCG to refrain from using AI generative tools to create final Magic products. Now we're evaluating how we work with our vendors on creative beyond our products, like these marketing images, to make sure that we are living up to those values.
Yeah, and you know exactly, this is exactly coming full circle back around to the very first thing I said when we transitioned to this topic was I think this is Wizards bungling their internal communication more than anything else. I don't think they deliberately used AI in anything here. I literally think they do a bad job checking of what's coming in. And what do you mean this is AI? No, somebody made this because they contracted a human to make it, but they didn't realize the human they contracted to make it was using, AI Photoshop or whatever. And rather than like confirming, they just knee jerk said, no, this is not AI. We hired a person to do this without going to the person and going, hey, how did you make this exactly? Like, I honestly think this is a perfect example of them putting the foot in their mouth and kind of like saying the wrong thing and making it worse by not just double checking and then in the future verifying that all these art pieces that they're getting from these vendors or whoever else are indeed authentic. It's going to have to be somebody's job now at Wizards to do that. But so I don't know. I don't want to jump on the bandwagon with pitchforks and torches and say, see, they said they weren't going to use AI and they were lying. I don't think they're lying. I don't think this was nefarious. I think they're just incompetent and they communicate very poorly in Wizards internally in a lot of ways. And we've seen this in many ways. Pinkertons is another example of them doing something really heavy-handed and ham-fisted, but not because they're evil, just because they're like not thinking properly. They're doing it. It's like a bunch of college kids who just graduated and they're running the company. Like they don't have the experience to like know what exactly the implications of this thing that they're doing or the consequences are going to be. Their optics are really bad, but I don't think they're internally nefarious and trying to, I don't know. And now I'm sure there's lots of people who disagree and say, no, they know exactly what they're doing. This is AI and da. I don't know. But it's almost,
I think the other big thing is we need to discuss we need to acknowledge that Wizards is made up of people who operate in separate departments. When people talk about Wizards, a lot of the times people assume that like, oh, it's one body. And yes, they're a company. People are operating with the company in, as agents of the company. So like we've all had those, corporate gigs where we understand like I'm speaking for this corporation. And if I say anything that isn't in alignment, I'm not going to be speaking for this corporation anymore. So like, obviously there's that, but the people who, reached out to the Pinkertons and hired them to go shake down some poor YouTuber because they got an advanced product of a product that sucked anyway. Like, okay, they got that. Like the people who reached out to the Pinkertons are not the same people who, reached out to this marketing firm to produce this image for social media. I guarantee those were different departments.
And who knows who was people. A part of that whole 1,100 person layoff before the holidays from Hasbro.
Exactly. Yeah, who made the final call on that? I mean, at the end of the day, like that's and that's the other thing that I think we need to be abundantly clear too. Not being aware that a vendor you're working with is taking some shortcuts that are, that's effectively stealing people of their creative work
and going directly against the announcement that you specifically made not to do this kind of thing. Like you think they would take that more seriously.
100%. And in that case, okay, you fire that vendor and you find somebody else who's not going to do that anymore. They have actions, they can have modes. That is uncool. That is problematic. Absolutely. Laying off hundreds of employees right before the holidays while pocketing $10 million, that's evil. That's different.
I mean, you're right, but this is the sad reality is that is normal.
I understand that as well. I'm not saying
many companies, that is the time when they lay off lots of employees. It sucks. It doesn't make it any better. Some of the choices were also wild to me. Like we can debate whether people like
my goodness,
Paul Cheon or Jesse Hill or the lady who I can't recall her name. She was the head of the Universes Beyond project. And
the one who probably
she nailed it.
Made the most. Yeah, made the single decision that probably made them more money than any other single decision in the last 10 years. Yeah.
Those individual firings, we can debate whether they were smart or not, but them laying off people, like sadly, this is capitalist Western countries dominated by massive corporations. This is how massive corporations operate. It's the end of the year budget. Let's like get those costs down to make it look good on the sheet for the next quarter or So I don't know.
But I think these scandals, these issues that we've seen so much over the last few months, I feel like we need to kind of look at each of them individually and, you know, gauge them for what they are. Like, whoever's responsible for this debacle, this AI art thing, not cool, fix it. But they can fix it. They'll make it right. And hopefully we're going to be done seeing AI art moving forward, you know?
Right.
But, you know, and
well,
that is
you know what's impressive? It's impressive how quickly the internet community can slap that hand as it tries to go in that cookie jar of AI. Like it's like they're like, what about this? Is anybody going to notice it's AI? Hell yes, we're going to notice. No, we said no AI. What are you doing? It's so great because the AI is so bad still that the art is immediately recognizable. Same with writing. There's a lot of articles and stuff now coming out that are clearly written by AI, and it's shocking how obvious it is. Like, great.
To a human eye, absolutely. We can absolutely
the problem
sniff it
is
out.
we know it's getting better, and we know eventually it's going to get to the point where it's going to be difficult to sniff out. Just like back in the day. Hell, I've been playing Magic for 30 years, and there were proxies when I was a 13-year-old kid. People were trying to pass off very high end at that time in the 90s. There was bubble jet laser printers coming out, and people were like, "Whoa, you can make a card look super," and hey, might even fool somebody. But then they got better and better and better. And I remember when I was living in South Korea, just before I moved back to Canada, some of the fakes coming out of China, you could buy them in lots of like a 10,000 copies of certain cards and things. And they were very good. They were almost indistinguishable. I mean, seriously, they were very good proxies. And then that's when they switched to the hollow foil, you know, the stamping. And then that was a way to combat it. But even then, like at some point, you know, it's just like this kind of thing, right? The AI art and this writing and everything else. We'll see. Are they going to keep trying to pull one over, or not them, but our artists that they work with, contractors, vendors, whoever, trying to continue, like as AI gets better, they're going to keep having to be more vigilant about this internally at Wizards, lest they post something that the community immediately recognizes and goes, whoa, that is AI. What are you doing? You know, that made them look bad. That was a black mark, a black eye for them. But I think it's they didn't even realize it was AI, like internally. I don't think anybody caught it.
It seems to, that's my guess. My guess is that the vendor sent it. They just kind of glanced at it real quick. Sweet, looks good, ship it. And they didn't really, and hopefully part of the process for preventing it moving forward is just more quality assurance internally. You know, get a couple more eyes on it. Make sure that you're really reviewing everything that's coming back before you ship it out. You know?
Yeah, we're all going to need a jeweler's loop soon to see what's true or not true on the internet. I don't know. It's getting crazy, but
it is.
On that note,
but yes,
is there anything else we should touch on?
A good one though. Thank you.
Nothing else to mention before we wrap it up?
I mean, that definitely covered the topics I wanted to touch on. Is there anything that you guys wanted to mention before we head out?
Y'all better bring that Jank to the Pizza Box tournament on the 14th.
Do it.
That's what I gotta tell y'all. Jank is the way.
Bring the Jank.
I'm gonna be. Yeah, I'd like to play in it. I don't know if I might be doing commentary for that one, but might be Ham and I. So
there may or may not be a Tali in my 75.
Excellent.
Yes, bring the Jank so we can talk about it on camera and rep it.
Yes, please. Because for the record, that's the other thing is with the Pizza Box tournaments, when you join, there is an opportunity where you can share your screen to a private a Discord server where we can actually watch your match, and we actually do and do feature commentary for it. If you have a cool deck, even if you don't think it's going to necessarily be the big meta killer, but you want to show it off, that's a place where you can, and we will do the commentary for those matches. It is a ton of fun. So please don't.
But it's not required.
Not required.
If you are shy and you don't want to share your janky list, then don't. Then you don't have to.
And that's fine. And but you're more than welcome to. We do encourage it, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, good stuff. Well, with that, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining for this episode of the MagicJank podcast. And Damien, good to have you back after a couple of weeks. We definitely appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Well, all right, everybody. We'll be back next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. Yeah, take it easy, everybody. Have a good one, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye. Get those qualifier playing points.
Get 'em.